The automatic doors of Guardian State Bank's West Haven branch hissed open at 9:03 a.m. Morning sunlight, usually a welcome sight, seemed to glare on the freshly mopped floors as 63-year-old Elliot Davis quietly rolled through the entrance in his wheelchair. He wore a slate-gray windbreaker, a worn baseball cap pulled low over his brow, and a calm expression that masked a lifetime of quiet resilience. He didn't look like someone important, and that was exactly the point, a calculated anonymity. Elliot made a slow circle of the lobby, observing, before approaching the front reception desk. The bank had only just opened, and most of the employees were still sipping from paper cups and adjusting their name badges, oblivious. A few clients sat scattered in the waiting area, heads bowed over their phones, lost in their own worlds. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon-scented floor polish, a stark contrast to the unfolding tension. "Excuse me," Elliot said gently, his voice a soft ripple in the quiet. "Could I speak with the branch manager, please?" Behind the counter, Sarah Miller glanced up, her movements sharp, dismissive. Mid-30s, platinum blonde, thick mascara, and a sharp bob that framed her face like two razor blades, cutting off any hint of warmth. She didn't smile. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, not even looking at him properly, her tone implying he was an inconvenience. "No, I don't," Elliot replied, his voice steady, unwavering, "but I'd appreciate." She cut him off with a raised palm, a gesture that burned with condescension. Then, as if Elliot wasn't even standing, sitting right there in front of her, she turned to her co-worker and said under her breath, "Betty's here to cash somebody else's check or complain about something we can't fix." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were loud enough to sting, a casual cruelty that cut through the air. A few heads turned in the waiting area. A teenage boy sitting with his mother shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his youthful innocence cringing. The mother frowned, her brow furrowed with disbelief and quiet indignation. Elliot paused, blinked slowly, and tilted his head, not in disbelief, but calculation. He hadn't expected this branch to be perfect, but this was a little more blatant than usual. A deep sigh he didn't utter resonated within him. "I can wait," he said calmly, his voice as steady as the rest of him, a rock against her tide. "But I'd still like to speak with the branch manager." Sarah sighed as though Elliot were asking her to mop the entire building, a theatrical display of annoyance. "Sir, unless you're a client here, I'm afraid the manager doesn't have time for walk-ins." "I'm not here to make a withdrawal," Elliot answered, his simplicity underscoring her overreaction. "Then what are you here for?" Sarah shot back, her voice rising slightly, losing its professional veneer. "Because I don't really have the patience today for—" "Is there a problem?" A man's voice cut across the lobby, a much-needed intervention. It came from David Garcia, a Latino man in his late 40s, wearing a blue name tag that read Client Services Representative. He'd walked in from the side hallway and was now watching the scene with tight lips and a furrowed brow, his concern palpable. Sarah didn't even glance his way, her arrogance blinding her. "I've got it, David." David didn't move, his stance firm. "Miss Miller," he said, voice lower now, a quiet warning. "You might want to lower your tone." "I said I've got it," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. Elliot looked at David for a long second. He nodded once, just enough to show he appreciated the gesture, a silent acknowledgement of an ally. Then, with the kind of patience that only comes from a lifetime of having to teach people how to treat you, Elliot turned back to Sarah. "Please," he said again. "Just the manager. That's all I'm asking." Sarah rolled her eyes, grabbed a clipboard, and slapped it on the desk in front of him, the sound a miniature explosion of exasperation. "Fine, write down your name. Someone might get to you in an hour." But Elliot didn't touch the clipboard. Instead, he calmly opened a leather folder resting on his lap. But before he could pull anything out, the mother and son in the waiting room exchanged glances, and the room, already tense, seemed to hold its breath, anticipating a clash of wills. Sarah leaned against the counter, pretending not to notice Elliot, unfolding the document from his leather folder. She turned slightly toward David, muttering just loud enough, her words dripping with disdain. I don't know why some people think demanding attention gets them somewhere. David didn't respond. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching, his silent disapproval a powerful force. Elliot took his time. He wasn't flustered. If anything, he looked like a man who had watched this sort of thing happen far too often to be surprised anymore, his weariness a testament to repeated injustices. If you are enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means a lot to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you. And back to the video. He slid a tri-folded sheet of paper onto the counter and tapped it once. I'd appreciate it if you could hand this to your branch manager, he said. Sarah scoffed. Sir, we don't accept unsolicited paperwork. If this is about a complaint, we have it online. It's not a complaint, Elliot said evenly, his voice a soothing balm against her rising anger. It's documentation. I already told you, she interrupted, her voice louder now, a raw edge of impatience. You're not on the appointment schedule, so unless you're depositing something or seeing a banker, you can wait just like everyone else. A murmur stirred from behind one of the clients near the coffee station. A woman in scrubs, holding a to-go cup, shifted her weight and whispered to the man next to her, her empathy a quiet ripple. She's talking to him like he's a child. He didn't need defending, but people were beginning to notice, their collective discomfort growing. Sarah, still not sensing the shift in the room, shoved the paper aside with a manicured fingernail and gave Elliot a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, a mask of false politeness. If you're not going to sign in, I'm going to have to ask you to move out of the reception area. Elliot leaned back slightly in his chair, not a retreat, more like someone taking inventory, assessing the full scope of her hubris. He turned to David. Would you mind taking a look at this, please? David stepped forward without hesitation, his loyalty unquestioning. Sarah immediately tried to stop him. He doesn't need to. But David held up a hand, not to Elliot, but to her, a quiet, firm gesture, a line drawn in the sand. He picked up the document, scanned it quickly, and then his eyes widened, a flash of dawning realization. This is from corporate, he said, his voice hushed with awe and trepidation. Sarah frowned. What? David didn't respond right away. He took a few steps back from the counter and read the bottom of the document again, letting the gravity of the words sink in. I think you should get Brian now, he said, his voice laced with urgency. Sarah hesitated. For what? He's with Now, David repeated, voice firm, leaving no room for argument. She blinked. David didn't say anything, but the look he gave her said plenty, a silent, powerful reprimand. With a loud sigh, Sarah grabbed the office phone behind the counter and pressed 2 buttons. She turned her back to the lobby as she spoke into the receiver, her voice muffled, her confidence visibly crumbling. Elliot didn't watch her. He was looking around the room. Clients were no longer pretending not to listen. Some were watching openly, their curiosity now unrestrained. One older man in a flannel jacket gave him a small nod, a gesture of solidarity. Another woman clutched her purse tighter, but didn't look away. From the corner, the teenager who'd come with his mother had pulled out his phone, not to record, just to text, but his eyes never left Elliot, captivated by the unfolding drama. Then Sarah hung up. He'll be out when he can, she muttered, stepping away from the desk like she wanted to disassociate from the entire situation, shedding her responsibility. Elliot glanced at David again. Thank you. David gave a slight nod. We don't get many visits from corporate. I didn't recognize you, sir. That's the idea, Elliot replied, a subtle hint of satisfaction in his tone. And now Sarah heard him, really heard him, for the first time, the cold truth washing over her. Corporate, she repeated. Her tone was flatter now, cautious, the smugness draining from her voice. You work for Guardian State? Elliot didn't answer. Instead, he turned to face the lobby again, resting his hands lightly on the wheels of his chair. His posture was still calm, but there was something about the way he looked at the floor, like he was waiting for something to snap into place, a cosmic order being restored. But Sarah hadn't pieced it together yet, and her mistake was thinking she still had control of the room, a dangerous illusion. Sarah paced behind the counter now, arms folded tightly, tapping her nails against her sleeve. Her earlier smugness had drained into something brittle. You could hear it in her silence, a quiet tremor of fear. But she still hadn't apologized, still hadn't asked for clarification. She was waiting, banking on the idea that whatever this man claimed, it could be explained away, a desperate clinging to control. Across the lobby, Michael Holland, one of the youngest tellers on staff, had paused mid-transaction. The moment felt heavier than it should have, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. He excused himself from his client, an elderly woman depositing her retirement check, and walked back to his station, where he leaned against the glass partition, eyes on Elliot. He'd seen the whole thing, the way Sarah had spoken to him, the way she dismissed David, who was easily the most respectful person on staff. Michael reached into his pocket and tapped open his camera app. He didn't hit record right away. He hesitated, then quietly hit the button in the corner, a silent act of defiance. The teenager who'd been watching Elliot whispered something to his mom. "Mom, is he like some kind of undercover boss?" She glanced at Elliot, then at Sarah, then back at her son. "He doesn't need to be undercover," she said. "He's got presence." Look how quiet she got all of a sudden. Their words, though whispered, carried the weight of observation. They weren't wrong. Sarah wasn't talking anymore. She kept looking toward the hallway, willing someone, anyone, to step out and make this stop, a silent plea for rescue. She shot David a glare, but he had returned to his desk, typing something quietly, deliberately ignoring her, his focus a deliberate act of disengagement. The front doors opened again, and a middle-aged woman in a power suit stepped in, paused, and looked around like she'd walked into the middle of something she wasn't ready for, her expression a mix of confusion and recognition. She stopped short when she saw Elliot, then seemed to consider her next steps. She turned and walked straight toward the reception desk. Sarah perked up, a flicker of her old self. "Hi, welcome to Guardian State. I can help you in just a—" "I'm not here for a transaction," the woman said. Her name was Eleanor, a regional investment client who'd worked with the bank for over a decade. Sarah recognized her face, but couldn't quite place her. Eleanor stepped over to Elliot and bent down just enough to speak without the whole room hearing, her voice laced with genuine respect. "Mr. Davis," she said warmly, I didn't know you'd be here today." He gave her a small smile. Neither did she. Eleanor looked up, locking eyes with Sarah. "Is that so?" The question hung in the air, a pointed accusation. Sarah opened her mouth, but couldn't get past the first syllable. She stared at Eleanor like she wanted to ask, "How do you know him?" But no words came out, her mind reeling. Eleanor straightened. "I'll be waiting over there. I was told you'd be making a visit sometime this month. I'm just glad I happened to be here." She looked around. "I see you're already making an impact." Elliot chuckled softly, unintended but noted. Eleanor walked to a chair by the window, pulled out her planner, and began to write, her calmness a stark contrast to Sarah's turmoil. Michael looked from her to Elliot, then back at his phone. He stopped recording. This wasn't a fight. This was a reveal, a moment of undeniable truth. The air had shifted, and even the clients who weren't sure exactly what was going on could feel it, a collective understanding dawning. Sarah finally walked back toward the reception desk. She moved slower now, her movements heavy with the dawning dread. "I didn't know," she said, looking down at the edge of the desk, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know who you were," Elliot replied without looking at her. "That's the point." His words were gentle, yet piercingly direct. She paused. "If I had known, I wonder." Elliot cut in, his tone still gentle, yet firm with conviction. "Would you have spoken to me differently if I looked the same, but wasn't someone important?" The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy with unspoken implications. No one moved. No one filled the silence. Even the usual clatter of keyboards and conversations had stopped, a chilling stillness. Michael glanced at David, who was now watching quietly from across the room. Sarah said nothing, but the hallway door finally clicked open, and the manager was coming. Sarah's last chance to save face was walking straight toward her, a final, desperate hope. The hallway door swung open, and Brian Covington stepped out. He was a tall man in his early 50s, built like a former college linebacker, with neatly combed hair that had surrendered to streaks of gray. His tie was slightly loosened, and his reading glasses dangled from the front pocket of his dress shirt. He looked like someone who could read people within seconds, and right now, he was already assessing the room, his gaze sharper than any blade. His eyes landed on Sarah first. Her shoulders straightened, but she didn't speak. She waited. Then he looked at Elliot. Their eyes met, and something clicked in Brian's expression. A flicker of recognition, a dawning horror. It wasn't full-blown panic, but close. "Mr. Davis?" Brian asked, stepping forward, his voice low but respectful, a deferential tremor. Elliot gave a slight nod. "Brian." That alone was enough to make the front desk feel 10 degrees colder, a sudden, icy shift in power. Brian moved closer, extending his hand. Elliot reached up and shook it, firm and steady, a grip of quiet authority. "I wasn't told you'd be visiting this location today," Brian said carefully, his professionalism strained. "I like to keep things simple," Elliot replied. "Surprise visits help me see things for what they really are." His words were a subtle reprimand. Brian nodded slowly. "Understood." Sarah looked between them, confused. "Now wait, he's not just from corporate." Her voice held a hint of frantic denial. Brian turned to her with a tight expression. "Sarah will speak later." His words were a cold dismissal. She hesitated, swallowing hard. "I just didn't." He cut her off with a glance, not rude, not loud, but definitive, a silent command that brooked no argument. "Mr. Davis, would you like to come into my office?" Brian asked. Elliot motioned to the counter. "I already submitted a document that should explain why I'm here." Brian took the folded paper from David, who had silently walked it over, and scanned it quickly, his jaw clenched, a visible tightening of his resolve. Then he stepped to the side. "Follow me, please." Elliot nodded and turned his chair toward the hallway, but he paused midway and looked back at Sarah. "I assume you have cameras in this branch?" he asked, his voice calm, yet infused with purpose. Brian answered without hesitation. "Yes, sir. 6-point coverage, synced to the internal server." If you are enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means a lot to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you. And back to the video. Composure shattering. "Mr. Davis, I didn't mean anything. I just didn't know." Her words were a desperate, hollow plea. Elliot studied her, not cruelly, not angrily, just directly, his gaze unflinching. "You meant exactly what you said. That's the problem." He turned and wheeled himself down the hallway, leaving Sarah standing there, visibly shrinking, her presence diminishing with each passing second. Eleanor, still seated by the window, closed her planner and gave Sarah a look that could only be described as disappointed, a silent judgment that cut deeper than words. Michael put his phone away. He didn't need the video anymore. The truth was already louder than any clip could have been, resonating through the stunned silence. Back in the hallway, Brian opened the door to his office and stepped aside to let Elliot in. "Would you like anything? Coffee? Water?" he asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. "No, thank you," Elliot replied. Brian sat behind his desk, opened his laptop, and logged in. "I'll cue up the footage now." They sat in silence for a few seconds, the hum of the computer filling the space, a dull background to the gravity of the moment. Brian tapped a few keys and brought up the security timeline. He rewound the feed to 9:03 a.m. Elliot watched as the scene played back. His entrance, Sarah's words, David's reaction, the crowd shifting, a damning replay. "I need a copy of this sent to legal," Elliot said, his voice quiet, yet authoritative. "Already done," Brian said without blinking, his efficiency a sign of his immediate understanding. Elliot looked over at him. Brian nodded once. The moment David brought me the paper, I knew. I'm not trying to fire people, Brian, Elliot said, his voice soft. But I also didn't come here to be spoken to like a street beggar. His words carried a weariness of experience. I understand. Brian rubbed the back of his neck. He looked tired now, the weight of the situation settling upon him. There are things we've overlooked, he said. I've let Sarah slide before. Sharp tongue, decent performance metrics, but today this was something else. Elliot didn't respond. He didn't need to. The footage was still playing, and Sarah's voice was crystal clear, a haunting echo of her mistakes. But outside the office, the lobby was stirring, and a silent message was spreading from person to person. Things were changing today, and it wouldn't stop with Sarah, a ripple effect of accountability. Back in the lobby, the noise didn't return. People still spoke in hushed tones, but it was the kind of quiet that follows a line being crossed. Everyone had seen something they weren't supposed to see, but no one was pretending anymore, their disillusionment evident. Sarah remained at the counter, arms locked tight over her chest. She kept glancing toward the hallway, like a school kid waiting for a principal's verdict, her anxiety a visible shroud. But the calm confidence she had worn earlier was gone. Her jaw moved slightly, like she was chewing on invisible words, trying to find something, anything, to say that might untangle what had just happened, a futile search for absolution. Michael stood near the teller booths, fidgeting with a paper clip. He wanted to walk away, back to his desk, back to the rhythm of deposits and transfers, but something held him there. Maybe curiosity, maybe something heavier, a sense of witnessing history. He glanced at David, who hadn't moved from his post. Their eyes met, and Michael said quietly, "Is this really happening?" David nodded once. Every bit of it. His words were simple, yet full of gravitas. Behind them, Eleanor stood up, brushing off her skirt. She walked over to the waiting area and addressed the room, not loudly, but with poise. "For those wondering," she said, "that man is not just part of corporate. He owns part of this bank." Heads turned. A few jaws dropped. Someone in the back whispered, "No way." Eleanor gave a small shrug. "I've worked with him. Brilliant investor. Private. Doesn't talk much, but when he does." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The implication hung heavy in the air. One of the older clients, Mr. Jenkins, who'd been banking there for 20 years, spoke for the first time. So he let her speak to him like that, and just waited? Eleanor nodded. That's how he works. He watches before he acts. His patience was a terrifying weapon. Sarah's head whipped around. "This is crazy," she said, half laughing, a desperate, hollow sound. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to follow protocol." But no one responded, not a word. Sarah looked to Michael, maybe hoping for backup. He looked away. She looked at David. He didn't flinch. "We both heard what you said, Sarah." "You know I didn't mean it like that," she said, voice rising, a futile attempt to shift blame. "It was just a joke." "Were you laughing?" David asked calmly. His question was a sharp, cutting truth. She didn't answer, her silence a confession. The hallway door opened again. Brian stepped out first, holding a small folder under his arm. Elliot followed, his hands on the rims of his wheels, face unreadable, his presence a silent judgment. Brian walked straight to Sarah. "Come with me, please," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold formality. "Why? What are you—" she started, but stopped herself. Something in his tone told her this wasn't a conversation. They disappeared into the back. The lobby fell quiet again. Elliot looked over the room. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He just scanned the faces. Some looked embarrassed, some curious, one or two ashamed, a tapestry of human reaction. He slowly wheeled over to Michael. "You were recording earlier," Elliot said, not as an accusation, just a fact, his tone unblinking. Michael cleared his throat. "Yeah, I thought it might help in case she denied it." "You can delete it," Elliot said. Michael blinked. "Sir, there's no need. There's no need, Elliot said. The lesson's already here. His words were a final, indelible mark. Michael nodded quietly, deleting the clip from his phone. I wasn't sure what to do. She outranks me. I didn't want to get involved. You did fine, Elliot said. The hard part isn't speaking up. It's knowing when to stay calm while the truth shows itself. His wisdom was a guiding light. Across the room, the teenage boy whispered, He's not what I expected. His mother smiled. That's the point, baby. People never are. Elliot heard her. He didn't turn, but his shoulders relaxed a bit, a moment of quiet satisfaction. But in the back office, a very different conversation was about to begin, and it wouldn't leave Sarah with many options. Ryan shut the door softly behind them. Sarah stood in the middle of the office, like the floor might give out. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. Her arms stayed crossed, but it wasn't out of confidence anymore. It was armor, fragile and failing. Ryan placed a folder on the desk and opened it slowly, carefully. Inside were printouts of the surveillance stills, pulled just minutes earlier. Her face was in every one of them, evidence irrefutable. I want to be very clear with you, he said. This isn't just a review. This is documentation. Sarah's voice cracked when she finally spoke. You're not serious. I'm not playing, Brian replied. Do you know how many people saw what happened out there? I didn't know who he was, she said again, desperation creeping in now, a futile defense. If I had known. Stop, he said flatly. She blinked. Brian tapped his pen on the table. Do you honestly believe it's acceptable to anyone that way? You think the problem was not knowing he was corporate, or that he was an owner? His questions were a relentless interrogation. I didn't mean it, she muttered, a weak, unconvincing whisper. Brian leaned back. You meant every word. You just didn't mean to be caught. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked smaller now, less polished. The cracks in her armor were showing, revealing her vulnerability. Brian leaned forward, lowering his voice. Do you understand the position you've put this entire branch in? That man didn't show up to fire anyone. He came to observe, that's all. You gave him a show he'll never forget. His words were a stinging indictment. I can apologize publicly. To him. To everyone, she said, reaching for a lifeline, a desperate gasp for air. Brian didn't budge. Do you think an apology rewrites the way you treated someone you thought had no power? She looked down. He continued, I've had complaints about your tone before. Clients, even staff. I let it slide because you moved numbers and followed procedures, but that ends now. His voice was firm, unyielding. Sarah's throat tightened. You're really letting me go? The question was laced with shock and disbelief. Brian folded his hands. Not because he told me to. Because I should have done this sooner. She stared at him, as if hoping to find even the tiniest crack of mercy in his face. But it wasn't there. Not anymore. I need your badge and login credentials, he said. She hesitated a second too long. Sarah, he said again. She finally unclipped her name tag and set it on the desk with shaking hands. Then, silently, she typed her deactivation code onto the company iPad. When she was done, she looked up. He humiliated me. Her words were a final, bitter accusation. No, Brian said calmly. You did that to yourself. His truth was a sharp, unavoidable blow. She took a slow breath, turned, and left without another word. Outside the office, Elliot sat quietly by the front desk. Eleanor had returned to her seat. The rest of the room had fallen back into that strange hush, but no one had left, awaiting the inevitable. The second Sarah appeared, badge gone, her coat folded over her arm, the room shifted. Not with cheers, not even with gasps, just recognition, a silent, collective understanding. She didn't look at anyone as she walked out, didn't speak, didn't meet a single eye. The door clicked shut behind her, a final, resounding click of an ending. Elliot looked up at Brian. All done, he asked. Brian gave a single nod. Then I'd like to speak to the team, Elliot said. Brian looked toward the staff lounge. I'll bring them in. He disappeared for a few moments, and when he returned, 6 employees followed behind him. David, Michael, a young woman from the loan's desk, 2 tellers, even the janitor, Robert. They all stood in a quiet semicircle near the waiting area, unsure what to expect, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Elliot didn't rise. He stayed in his chair, just as he had when he entered, but his voice, when he finally spoke, carried across the room like someone who'd been holding it in for years, a deep well of experience. But before the first sentence left his mouth, everyone could feel it. This wasn't going to be about punishment. It was going to be about something bigger, a lesson for them all. Elliot looked at the staff gathered in front of him, not with anger, not with scorn, but with the quiet gravity of someone who'd lived long enough to know exactly how people work. His hands rested gently on the arms of his chair, and when he spoke, there was no performance in his voice, just truth, raw and unvarnished. "I didn't come here today to trap anyone," he began. "I didn't come to catch someone slipping or to fire a person. That's not my role." No one moved. "I came because every few months I visit our branches. I don't announce it. I don't wear a suit. I just show up, sit, watch, ask simple questions, not to test your banking skills, but to see how people are treated when they look like they have nothing to offer you." His words were a gentle, yet profound challenge. Michael lowered his eyes. The woman from loans shifted her stance. Even David looked like he was holding his breath, absorbing every word. "Today," Elliot continued, I wasn't addressed as a client. I wasn't addressed as a man. I wasn't even addressed as a human being. I was spoken to like a problem, like an inconvenience." He paused, and the only reason that changed was when Sarah realized I had power. The silence was dense now, not uncomfortable, but weighty, the kind that made every person think about what they'd do if it had been them behind the desk. A moment of deep introspection. "I've spent most of my adult life being underestimated, dismissed, looked past," Elliot said, voice still calm. "And that's fine. I don't need attention. I've built my life quietly without needing validation." He turned slightly to look at Michael. "But you saw something wasn't right, and you pressed record. You didn't say a word, but you knew it mattered. That takes something." His words were a balm of unexpected praise. Michael looked stunned. I didn't know what else to do. "That's okay," Elliot said. "You didn't need to fix it. You just needed to acknowledge it, and you did." Then he looked at David. "You spoke up, not to protect me, but because it was the right thing to do. That means more than you know." David nodded, a little overwhelmed. "Honestly, I thought I'd get written up." Elliot gave a faint smile. "Maybe in another bank. Not this one." He turned back to the group. "Some of you said nothing. I understand. It's hard when someone above you is doing wrong. Most people freeze. But I want you to remember something." He leaned forward slightly, voice a little firmer. "The way you treat a person when you think they can't help you, that's the version of yourself the world remembers." No one blinked. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to save the day. But you do have to try. Every time someone walks through that door, they're trusting you with more than money. They're trusting you not to humiliate them, not to reduce them. His words were a powerful mandate for humanity. Eleanor, still standing near the side, quietly wiped a tear from her eye, moved by his message. Elliot took a breath. Sarah lost her job today, not because of me, because she exposed something in herself that shouldn't exist in a place built on trust. He looked around one more time. This branch can be better. You can set the tone. You can create a place where no one questions if they belong. That choice isn't mine, it's yours. His challenge was an empowering call to action. Ryan stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I think we all needed to hear that, sir." Elliot nodded slowly. "Then let's hope you take it with you." He started to wheel himself back toward the front doors. No applause followed, no grand gestures, just the quiet hum of people processing what they'd just witnessed, a transformation in progress. But as he reached the lobby entrance, something unexpected happened. Someone stepped forward, quietly, respectfully, to speak, not as an employee or client, but as a person. The person who stepped forward was the janitor, Robert Green, 65 years old, slow-moving, and always in early, before the staff even punched in. Most barely noticed him unless he was pushing a mop or emptying bins. But Elliot did. Robert nodded once. "Sir, I just want to say thank you for how you handled this." His voice held a deep gratitude. Elliot turned slightly in his chair. "And what's your name?" "Robert. Robert Green." Elliot gave a quiet smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Robert." His words were a rare and precious gift. Robert looked down, then back up. "Been working in this branch since they opened. 30 years, maybe more. I've seen people come and go. I've seen people promoted who didn't know how to look others in the eye." He didn't say Sarah's name. He didn't have to. Robert's voice wavered a bit. "I've cleaned up after folks who thought they were too good to say hello. That kind of thing stays with a man." Elliot nodded slowly. "Respect doesn't come from a title." "No, sir," Robert replied. "It sure doesn't." Their exchange was a profound moment of shared understanding. Michael was still standing near the teller station, watching all of this unfold like he'd stumbled into a story he wasn't expecting to be part of, his mind alight with new perspectives. The woman from loans stepped forward now, hesitantly. I didn't know what to say earlier, but I saw what happened, and I should have said something." Elliot looked at her gently. "And now you have." She seemed surprised by his response, like she was waiting to be scolded, not acknowledged. A burden lifted from her shoulders. Then came the quiet shuffle of chairs. A few clients began to collect their things. Some whispered their goodbyes, but no one moved quickly. They lingered, like they were still trying to understand the weight of what they'd seen, the profound impact of the morning's events. Near the door, Eleanor caught up to Elliot one more time. "If you ever decide to take a public-facing role," she said with a smile, "I'll be the first in line to vote for you." Her admiration was undeniable. He chuckled. "No campaign signs of my future." Eleanor leaned in slightly. "That speech, it'll stay with people." "Let's hope their actions match it," Elliot replied. Brian joined them near the door, holding a sealed envelope. "I drafted an apology letter from the branch addressed to you personally, though I doubt it captures the full extent of the day." Elliot accepted the envelope, but didn't open it. "I'm not here for apologies, Brian," he said. "I'm here to see who this branch really is, and I saw it today." His words were a testament to his true purpose. Brian glanced over his shoulder at the staff. "We'll be better." "Don't tell me," Elliot said. "Show them." They stood in silence for a moment, then Brian extended a hand. Elliot took it. Back at the reception desk, Sarah's absence felt glaring. The empty chair, the untouched clipboard, it all sat there like a reminder of what had just played out, a ghost of arrogance. Elliot began to will himself to the door, but before he could reach it, Michael caught up to him. "Mr. Davis?" he asked, a little breathless. Elliot stopped. Michael rubbed his palms together, nervous. "I was wondering, would you be willing to come back? Not to inspect us or anything, but to speak to the new hires, or even the interns. I think people would really benefit from hearing you again." His request was sincere and hopeful. Elliot paused. "That's not my job, son." "I know," Michael said quickly, "but I think it matters." There was something in the way Michael said it that landed. Not flattery, not obligation, just belief. A raw, honest plea. Elliot considered that. "I'll think about it." Michael nodded. "Thank you for today." Outside, the automatic doors opened. Sunlight spilled into the lobby again as Elliot rolled forward. A woman, one of the clients, stepped ahead and held the door for him, not because he needed it, not because she had to, but because it was decent, a small act of profound respect. Elliot looked up at her. She just smiled and said, "Have a good day, sir." "You too," he said quietly. He passed through the door, down the ramp, and into the quiet of the parking lot. But even as he disappeared from view, everyone inside the branch knew something had shifted, not just in policy, but in perspective, a quiet revolution. The branch stayed quiet long after Elliot was gone. Brian stood in the lobby, arms crossed, watching the staff return to their duties, one by one. There was no laughter, no chit-chat, no casual shuffling of papers to break the tension, just the sound of realignment. People reevaluating what they thought they knew about the place they worked in. A new chapter beginning. In the break room, Michael sat with David, each quietly sipping from paper cups. David looked up. "You ever seen something like that?" he asked. Michael shook his head. "Not in real life. Only in movies. But this felt more honest." David nodded slowly. "That's because it was." Their words were a shared understanding of a defining moment. Down the hall, Robert was pushing his mop across the tile, a little slower than usual. He stopped near the front window and looked out, eyes scanning the parking lot where Elliot had vanished. He didn't smile, but there was a lightness to his face, a quiet satisfaction, a sense of justice served. Maybe Brian eventually walked back to his office. The envelope Elliot had left untouched still in his hand. He placed it in a locked drawer, not because it needed to be hidden, but because some things didn't require display. They just needed to exist, a silent, powerful record. An hour passed, then two. Clients came and went. Transactions resumed. The phones rang again. On the surface, everything returned to normal, but it wasn't the same. Michael now greeted each person at his counter with direct eye contact, a newfound respect in his gaze. The young woman from loans asked 3 times if her client needed anything else. David stayed near the front desk longer than usual, not hovering, but watching, a vigilant guardian. And Sarah's absence echoed louder than any reprimand could have, a constant, silent reminder. By late afternoon, Eleanor had already placed a call to corporate, giving her version of events, detailed, accurate, and respectful. She didn't embellish, she didn't exaggerate, she simply told the truth. "I've worked with Guardian State for a long time," she said over the phone. "And today, I saw something I hope you never forget. Your people don't need more training. They need more listening." That quote would later circulate quietly through the upper offices, a legacy of a single, powerful morning. Back at the branch, the teenager who'd sat with his mom that morning returned after school with a $5 bill. He walked up to the counter where Michael stood and said, "I just wanted to say, I thought that guy was cool. I liked the way he didn't yell." Michael smiled. "Me too." The boy looked at the deposit slip in his hand. "I want to open an account here." Michael handed him a pen. "Best decision you'll make." The small act was a testament to the profound impact of Elliot's quiet stand.